Long Island medium Theresa Caputo's explosive decision. Theresa Caputo has decided to take legal action against her ex-husband Larry Caputo. She has made it clear, if I can't be with Larry, then his second wife can't be at peace either. Theresa's statement is even more harsh. I'll feed Larry jail time if necessary. This has sparked a lot of speculation among fans. Everyone is waiting to see where this legal battle between Larry and Theresa will end up. Theresa Caputo sat in her Long Island home, the glow of flickering candles casting long shadows across the room. The spirits whispered to her, their voices urgent, their message clear. Larry has wronged you, and justice must be served. For years, she had tried to move on, to accept that her ex-husband had built a new life with another woman. But the spirits never let her forget. Night after night, they murmured secrets, revealing things she had never known, hidden betrayals, unspoken lies. And then, last night, the spirits had shown her something she could not ignore. A vision. Larry was hiding something big, and Theresa was going to uncover it. Theresa stormed into her lawyer's office the next morning, her signature blonde hair bouncing with every step. I want to take legal action against Larry, she announced. Her lawyer raised an eyebrow. For what exactly? Theresa leaned forward, lowering her voice. The spirits told me something. He's done something illegal. I just need to find out what. The lawyer hesitated. Theresa, you can't just file a lawsuit based on a hunch. Theresa smirked. Oh, it's more than a hunch. The spirits never lie. That evening, Larry was enjoying a quiet dinner with his new wife, Angela, when the doorbell rang. Angela opened the door, only to find Theresa standing there, her eyes blazing. You need to leave, Angela said firmly. Theresa didn't budge. Instead, she smiled. Angela, sweetheart, you might want to ask your husband what he's been keeping from you. Larry appeared at the door, his face darkening. Theresa, this is ridiculous. Is it? Theresa tilted her head. Because I have a feeling the police won't think so when they see what I've found. Larry stiffened. You're bluffing. Theresa reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. Tax fraud, Larry. Really? You should know by now. You can't hide from the spirits. Angela gasped. Larry's face turned pale. Theresa leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. If I can't be happy, Larry, neither can you. Within weeks, Larry was under investigation. The news spread fast. Theresa Caputo, the Long Island medium, had uncovered a shocking scandal involving her ex-husband. Fans were divided. Some believed she was just being vindictive. Others were convinced that her spiritual abilities had once again revealed the truth. As Theresa walked away from the courthouse, she looked up at the sky and smiled. The spirits had guided her well. Justice had been served. However, Emily stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her veil. Tomorrow was her wedding day, a day she had dreamed of since she was a little girl. But something in her heart told her that she needed to do something special before she walked down the aisle. She wanted to feel the presence of her late grandmother, Margaret, who had always been her guiding light. That's when she got the idea. She would surprise her family with a reading from none other than the famous Long Island medium, Theresa Caputo. That evening, Emily gathered her close family members at her parents' house, pretending it was just a small pre-wedding get-together. The air was filled with laughter, the scent of fresh flowers, and the warmth of love. But when Theresa Caputo walked into the room, everyone gasped. Emily, what's going on? Her mother, Linda, asked, eyes wide in shock. Emily smiled. I wanted to do something special before the wedding. I know we all miss Grandma Margaret, and I thought, maybe Theresa could help us feel her presence. A hush fell over the room as Theresa sat down. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and after a moment, she spoke. There's a strong presence here, Theresa said. A woman, very loving, very protective. She keeps showing me a wedding dress. She's so proud of you, Emily. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. That has to be Grandma, she whispered. Theresa nodded. She said she wouldn't miss your wedding for anything. She'll be right there, holding your hand." Emily's mother let out a small sob. She always said she'd see Emily walk down the aisle, no matter what. Theresa smiled. She just said, "Tell them to stop crying. This is a celebration." Everyone laughed through their tears. Emily felt a warmth surround her, as if her grandmother was right there, embracing her one last time before the big day. The reading continued, bringing messages of love, joy, and reassurance from the other side. By the end, everyone felt lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. As Emily hugged her mother, she whispered, "Now I know for sure, Grandma will be there with me tomorrow." And on her wedding day, as she walked down the aisle, she felt a soft, unseen hand squeeze hers. She knew in that moment that love never truly leaves, it just finds a new way to stay with us forever. However, Sophia had spent years struggling with the idea of coming out to her family, but the hardest part had been her father. A strict, traditional man, he had passed away before she found the courage to tell him the truth that she was a transgender woman. Though her mother and sister had accepted her, a part of her heart remained heavy with doubt. Would her father have understood? Desperate for closure, she booked a session with Theresa Caputo, the famous Long Island medium. She wasn't sure if she truly believed in spirits, but she needed to try. The day of the reading, she sat across from Theresa, nervous and skeptical. The medium closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "There's a man here," Theresa said suddenly. "A father figure. He's strong, proud, but he has regret. He's saying he wishes he had more time." Sophia's breath hitched. "My father?" Theresa nodded. "He says he didn't understand in life, but he does now. He sees you. He knows who you are." She paused as if listening. Then she smiled. "He says he always called you his little fighter, and you are. He's proud of you, Sophia." Tears welled up in Sophia's eyes. Her father had called her that as a child. She had spent so long wondering, so long fearing that she had disappointed him. But here, in this moment, she felt his presence, not as judgment, but as love. A weight lifted from her chest. She would never hear his voice again, never see him nod in approval. But now she knew, she was truly, finally accepted. However, David had never believed in mediums. To him, they were all charlatans, preying on people's grief. When his sister Emily insisted he accompany her to a live event with Theresa Caputo, the Long Island medium, he scoffed. "I'll go," he said, "but only to prove she's a fraud." The auditorium buzzed with anticipation. Theresa walked on stage, her signature blonde hair teased high, her presence warm yet commanding. She started picking up messages from the other side, calling out to people in the audience. David folded his arms, unimpressed, until she suddenly paused and turned in his direction. "There's a young man here," she said, her eyes scanning the crowd. "He passed suddenly. He's showing me a baseball glove. Does that mean anything to someone over here?" David's heart clenched. His son Jake had died in a car accident 3 years ago. They used to play catch every evening. Emily squeezed his hand, urging him to speak up. Hesitantly, he nodded. Theresa smiled gently. "He says, 'Dad, it's okay, it wasn't your fault.'" David felt the breath leave his lungs. Guilt had consumed him since the accident. He was supposed to pick Jake up that night, but had been late. Theresa continued, "He's showing me a blue bicycle. He says, 'Tell Dad I heard him every night.'" Tears welled in David's eyes. Every night, he had sat by Jake's old bike in the garage, whispering apologies into the dark. How could she possibly know? Theresa walked closer. "Jake says, 'Dad, you gotta let go of the guilt. I love you, and I need you to live again.'" A sob escaped David's lips. In that moment, years of skepticism shattered. He didn't know how, but he knew. Jake was there, and for the first time in 3 years, David felt peace. However, Jonathan Lipnicki had always been a skeptic when it came to the supernatural. He had spent his childhood in the spotlight, starring in movies like Jerry Maguire and Stuart Little. But as he grew older, he shifted his focus to fitness and independent films. Ghosts, spirits, and mediums, that was all Hollywood fantasy to him. But one evening, everything changed. Jonathan's manager had set up an unexpected meeting with Theresa Caputo, the famous Long Island medium. At first, he thought it was some kind of publicity stunt. But when he met her at a quiet cafe in Los Angeles, he could tell she was serious. "Jonathan," Theresa said, her thick Long Island accent unmistakable, "I have a message for you." He chuckled nervously. "From who?" She took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment. "Your grandparents. They've been trying to reach you." Jonathan's smile faded. His grandparents, Ruth and Samuel Lipnicki, had passed away years ago. He had loved them dearly, but he never believed in the idea of an afterlife. I don't know," he muttered. "That doesn't make sense." Theresa tilted her head as if listening to someone only she could hear. "Your grandfather says you still have his old pocket watch. The one he gave you when you were a kid. You don't wear it, but you keep it in a drawer." Jonathan's heart skipped a beat. That was true. His grandfather's watch had been sitting in his nightstand for years. He hadn't told anyone about it. "He wants you to know he's proud of you," Theresa continued. "He says you've worked so hard to prove yourself beyond being a child star. And your grandmother, she says you need to stop doubting yourself. She always told you that, didn't she?" Jonathan felt a lump in his throat. His grandmother had always been his biggest supporter, reminding him that he was more than just his past roles. "She also says," Theresa added with a small smile, "that you should stop eating so many protein bars. They taste terrible." Jonathan let out a surprised laugh, his eyes misty. His grandmother had always teased him about his obsession with fitness food. For the first time in his life, he wasn't sure what to believe. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to the world than he thought. As he left the cafe that night, he slipped his grandfather's pocket watch into his jacket pocket, holding it just a little tighter than before. However, Theresa Caputo sat in her familiar spot, the warm glow of candles flickering around her as a small group of people gathered in her reading room. The Long Island medium had done countless readings over the years, but this one felt different. Across from her sat a woman named Emily, her hands nervously twisting in her lap. She had lost her brother Danny in a tragic accident 2 years ago, and tonight she hoped for a message, something, anything, that would bring her peace. Theresa closed her eyes, letting the energy in the room settle. Almost immediately, a strong presence made itself known. A young man, full of life, gone too soon. She felt the weight of his passing like a heavy stone in her chest. "Emily, your brother is here," Theresa said, her voice soft but certain. Emily let out a shaky breath, tears already pooling in her eyes. "He's showing me a motorcycle, did he?" Emily nodded quickly. "Yes, he loved his bike. That's how he—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Theresa swallowed hard, feeling a strange tightness. Danny's energy was strong, but there was something else, something personal, something that made her own heart ache. "He says he wasn't ready to go. He still had things to do." A sudden wave of grief crashed over Theresa, unexpected and raw. Images flashed in her mind, her own brother, Michael, his accident, the pain her family endured. It was as if the spirits weren't just speaking to Emily, they were speaking to her. She gasped, pressing a hand to her chest. Her vision blurred. The words caught in her throat. "Theresa?" Emily's voice was gentle, concerned. Theresa took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. This was Emily's moment, not hers, but the emotions wouldn't let go. He wants you to know he's okay. That he's watching over you," she managed, her voice trembling. "And he doesn't want you to carry guilt. It wasn't your fault." Emily broke down, covering her face as she sobbed. "I should have stopped him from writing that night." Theresa wiped away a tear of her own. "He says you couldn't have known. He's free now, happy, and he wants you to live without regret." The room was silent except for the quiet cries of Emily and the lingering hum of spirit energy. Theresa exhaled deeply. Even after all these years, spirit had a way of reminding her that she too was human. That sometimes, a message wasn't just for the person sitting across from her. Sometimes, it was for her too. However, Emma sat nervously in the waiting room, clutching a locket that once belonged to Jake. It had been almost a year since she had watched him take his last breath. The accident had been sudden, brutal. One moment they were laughing in the car, and the next, everything shattered. She had survived, but Jake hadn't. The guilt never left her. Now she was here, in front of Theresa Caputo, the Long Island medium. Emma wasn't sure if she believed in all this, but she was desperate. She needed to know if Jake was okay, if he forgave her. Theresa greeted her warmly, but the moment she sat down, the medium's expression changed. She took a deep breath and held her hand over her heart. "Oh, honey," Theresa whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm getting a strong presence. A young man, dark hair, a beautiful smile. He's showing me a car, an accident. He's telling me it wasn't your fault." Emma's breath hitched. Tears welled in her eyes. "Jake?" she whispered. Theresa nodded. "He's saying he never left you. He was right there in the ambulance, holding your hand. He doesn't want you to feel guilty anymore." Emma covered her mouth, the sobs coming uncontrollably. She had spent months blaming herself, wishing she had done something differently. But hearing this, hearing him, felt like the closure she never thought she'd get. Theresa wiped a tear from her own eye. "He's also showing me a locket. Do you have it with you?" Emma gasped and opened her palm, revealing the locket in her trembling hand. "He says, 'I'll always be with you, Em. Live your life.'" Emma clutched the locket to her chest. For the first time since that tragic night, she felt a sense of peace. Jake was still with her, not in pain, not angry, just love. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to breathe. Hello, lovely viewers. Welcome to my channel. I am Mina. Hope your day is so well. If you like the video, don't forget to subscribe the channel.